Welcome to another episode of Sage Real Stories. I am joined today by Jessica Braff. Hello, Jess. I am so happy that you have come forward to share your story today. It's a really, really powerful one. Jessica Braff is a careered marketing and brand strategy consultant who faced the adversity of not having the children she always wanted. And this is a topic that I'm sure is felt by many women, whether they have chosen or not chosen to have a life without children. And so, knowing this and knowing that other women are going through this as well, Jessica has taken on the mission of channeling her own grief to help other women who have grieved in the shadows of society and to create a sense of optimism and even joy in rewriting the next chapter of this life without children. And so today, Jess is going to be sharing her personal journey, and it's a first step for her in sharing this journey and really coming openly out and bringing this story forward in an effort to help other women. And I'm just so proud of you, Jessica, and really honored to have you here today. Welcome to the Sage Real Stories podcast, where we are hearing from real women who have a story to share. As women, we face many different challenges as we navigate through this thing called life. But no matter what it is, someone has been there, has been through those woods and charted a path. Hearing these stories can be so valuable. They can inspire us, empower, make us feel like we aren't alone. At Sage, we're taking it one step farther, and we are connecting you with that woman who has the story you need to hear. To have a conversation where you can ask questions and have a mutually meaningful connection. If there is a speaker you hear on this podcast series that resonates with you, email hello@sagelink.com and we will connect you. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy this Sage Real Story. Inside that strength from inside.
Learn on within. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak with Sage community and to give me a platform to share my own story. And it's a big step for me because this is one of the first times I've kind of broadly spoken about my story, but I think it's an important one. And like you said, I'm really kind of pivoting my mission in life to help other women in this experience. So thanks so much.
Start by just telling us a little bit about the beginning of this journey for you. Walk us through it a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's as I reflect on my own story, it kind of becomes hard to identify where it even started. I think if I could point to one time in life, it was actually more than 10 years ago. So I will say that I just turned 46 last weekend. And as I reflect back on how I've gotten here in life, it was probably about 10 plus years ago that I was coming to the end of a relationship that I thought that was going to turn into my happily ever after story with a partner. I'm currently based on the West Coast in Northern California, but I was living in New York with a partner. I was working in advertising at the time and kind of had the life that I'd envisioned since my mid 20s. I had just kind of turned 30 or 31. And I just kind of saw my life kind of playing out in a way that most people do. I think, the dreams of finding the career you want to pursue, having the partner you want to settle down with, imagining what that wedding would look like, imagining what your children would look like and where you would set up home. And just after I turned 30, my relationship that I'd been in for 4+ years of my 20s kind of came to a crashing halt. I had felt that I was done living in New York. I felt kind of inner tension with my relationship to my career. And so my life sort of kind of imploded, if you will, unexpectedly. And I was faced with not having that dream kind of pan out of what this relationship would look like. And I kind of fled. What's interesting is I'm somebody who has an adventurous spirit, and I had felt somewhat kind of trapped in this life of working in New York in advertising and kind of being in this traditional life. And when my relationship broke up, I had this epiphany that I wanted to kind of see the world. So I quit my job and I left New York, and I traveled through Southeast Asia and Asia for about a year and a half, kind of taking a life sabbatical to reconnect with myself.
How old were you at that point?
I was 31, so
Okay.
I spent about a year and a half. So from 31 to mid 32, I spent kind of exploring myself, in part as a reaction to what felt like kind of my life imploding. I felt this need to kind of flee and re-explore who I was as a
Mhm.
person. By doing so, traveling, I felt a little bit old to be doing that at that point. Most of my contemporaries who I met on the road and who I left in New York were all settling down, and I felt like I didn't fit in. And a lot of the people that I met overseas traveling throughout Asia and Southeast Asia were doing their gap years in so they were, in their mid 20s. And I felt like I didn't really have a place. But I also reconnected with myself. And it was easily one of the most impactful times of my life. Just figuring out who I was as a person, and stop like tuning out the noise of all the shoulds. I think that I had told myself this story that I should have, by that point in my life, found the person I was meant to marry. I should be settling down and thinking about children. And so by traveling and reconnecting with my inner voice, I was able to kind of tune out those shoulds.
Actually, a really powerful thing that you were able to do that a lot of people can't do is to identify the difference between what they feel they should be doing and what they actually want or feel deep inside that is pulling them to be doing. You know what I'm saying? So, how did you have that ability to discern, do you think? Was it just natural for you, or did you struggle with it a little bit? Tell us a little bit about that point.
Yeah, I think there was absolutely struggle in that decision. My family didn't support this, pulling myself out of the workforce for a while without really having a concrete plan or a means of making solid money. It was absolutely a struggle. At the same time, I knew the other side of that decision. The thought of sticking around in this life that no longer felt like it fit, uh, felt constricting and suffocating and sad. So I guess maybe in my heart, and maybe the kind of person I am, I lead a somewhat alternative lifestyle, which enables me to pursue things that speak to my heart. But
Mm.
there was absolutely struggle in the decision to leave the States, to leave a sense of security, and to feel alone at that point in time in being kind of a free, independent spirit that does is not following a traditional path. I've wrestled with that a lot in the course of my life, and that is definitely something. It's a common theme even today that I still struggle with. But for me, tuning into my own heart is paramount above all else that society kind of expects from me. And so that is also a theme that I've kind of tuned into, despite some of that societal struggle and what I should be doing with my life.
It's inspiring that you're able to do that. I think a lot of people want to be able to live that truth and can't. So I think that's wonderful that you do, and that's a tenet of your life. So
Thank you. Yeah, it's not without some struggle, but I think that it has helped me feel like I will end my life without regrets. So I want to always be able to say I've pursued my heart's calling.
amazing. And I love that you call it an alternative life style, but it's interesting because you were looking at alternatives too. I don't think that's what you meant, but initially I did. I said, it's interesting to think of life as, well, if I go down this path of what I should be, I'm going to feel constrained and I'm going to feel unfulfilled and I'm going to feel like that's not the path for me. And I don't want that alternative. And that's, kind of you chose the other path for that
Mhm.
reason.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. And I think, you know, something that we should all maybe contemplate more. So you are in your 30s, low 30s, which seems so young now to me, but I get that compared to a lot of other kind of backpackers and people doing these explorations that, in your low 30s, most people, I guess, that we knew were married and starting to think about starting families. So
Right. Yeah.
you're exploring yourself.
Yeah. Halfway between 32 and 33, the negative self-talk started to kind of creep into my brain and said, maybe I should come back into real life, whatever real life meant. So I packed up my things and moved back from Asia, and I landed in Northern California in the Bay Area, and got another traditional job in an adjacent field to what I had been working in advertising in New York City. Went back to a bit of the more traditional life that I had left with new perspective for sure. And so what transpired for many years thereafter was I fell into that traditional kind of work life again. I started to build a career again in the marketing and brand strategy and market research space that was exciting. A job that allowed me to travel around the world. Probably spent about 60 to 80% of my time on the road, and it was exciting work. And I got to meet a lot of people around the world. I think that lifestyle spoke to me for a, a handful of years. It kind of fulfilled me, and I was feeling purpose driven at that stage of my life. But I struggled for many years in the dating world, and it was hard to identify whether I was struggling because I always had one foot out the door and was traveling for work, or whether that lifestyle that I had chosen in my career actually was keeping me from meeting somebody who wanted what I wanted. I think what I'd realized in the time that I spent overseas was that um I didn't want to shortchange the adventure of my life, but I didn't ever not want a family. So I kind of had just assumed subconsciously that I'd find my person and I would build that life. It might be later than the average woman, but that was a given in my mind. And so for upwards of 5 to 7 years, I spent kind of actively dating through my 30s. And what I realized was that I just wasn't finding the right person who really wanted the same thing I wanted. And I don't think I realized it at the time. I think I hadn't kind of awakened to my own inner dating patterns. But I think at this time, I must have been about 35, 36, 37, knowing that my time was kind of limited. Here we are. I think they say what at 35, women who are 35 plus are considered geriatric pregnancies.
Yeah, I know.
Um, isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
And
it's a
so,
terrible time too.
meanwhile, I hadn't even found my person yet.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize at the time was all this anxiety that I'm sure I was projecting onto the pace of a relationship.
Yeah. I know a lot of women in their late 30s that I'm personally friends with and I've talked to do feel like very much pressured at that point. After 35, when they're dating, it's like whether it's conscious or subconscious. So you do feel like perhaps, how do you think that affected your dating? Like, how do you think it kind of manifested? I'm curious if you
Well,
can think of.
yeah, I mean, what I will say is I didn't have this awareness at the time. So my awareness has developed now over years of self-work and inner work. I'm somebody who other people might define as a seeker, and what I mean by that is I'm kind of always looking for self-growth. I think if I were to rewind back and kind of reflect on what my behavior looked like in those years, it was a sense of probably trying to push a relationship faster than it organically happened,
Mhm.
because I knew I was on a timeline. And I want to start out by saying I think that especially, and keep in mind, so I'm now 46, so this was, 10 years ago already. It's now acceptable and even encouraged for women to freeze their eggs. I think we have entered into a point in society where women are allowed to prioritize their careers, and there's accelerated innovation, and we've come a long way in preservation of fertility. And 10 years ago was just the very beginning. So my doctor wasn't even really talking about it with me, and a lot of my girlfriends who at the time were younger than me, in their late 20s, at most early 30s, who were very very much still in their fertility years, or other women who were of my age who had already started to have the kids they wanted. So we weren't talking about preserving fertility. And quite frankly, I reflect on that a lot now, because I did not freeze my eggs. And at the same time, even if I had, I don't know that I would have used them. I can get to that part of the story in a minute. But when it came to my dating experiences, I think that I probably projected this sense of anxiety of, of fast forwarding the pace of relationships. Relationships need a period of time to breathe, to figure out if you are ready to have those discussions. But given my age, I probably was making the accelerating the pace faster than it needed to go. That was one thing. I think there were lots of other elements into probably choosing the wrong men and avoidant men, or men who were, quite frankly, just not ready to commit. And that's another revelation I had in my own healing journey.
You probably felt like you wanted to move on to the next one. If this one wasn't going to work, you wanted to know. And I think that's also kind of how females think. There's a difference between, I think, sometimes how men think and how females think about certain things. And I think women do have that sense of wanting to figure things out and plan. And, I think it's such a natural thing at that age to want to just say, okay, buddy, are you the one for me or not? Because I need to move on and find that, I don't want to waste time. And I think that's probably something almost everyone that wants children, that does want a family, does want children, probably experiences while they're dating in their late 30s. As in terms of females, it's interesting. I wonder, I sort of want to talk to men. They don't have like a timeline to when they can produce that's as circumscribed as women do. So it's just very different. But I bet they probably feel similarly, maybe in their like late 40s. I'm not sure, but I think it's probably such a natural way to feel. So
Yeah. So fast forward to my 40th birthday, which in my mind kind of was represented a milestone. That's when I think I would identify when grief really started to hit me, although I don't know that I knew it at the time. There was something about the age hitting 40 when I started to come to terms with the fact that maybe a life having not having the children that I always dreamed of was a real possibility. And so I started frantically looking for what to even like. I didn't even know how to talk about it or what to call that experience. All I knew is that I was just really sad at the idea of not having that that life that I had always dreamed of. I was still actively dating and was still hopeful. My family comes from a long line of geriatric births themselves. My grandmother had my mother at 41, and that was in the 1940s, which was pretty unheard of at that time. So, I guess biologically, I had assumed that I was always capable of having a child potentially later, in my fertility years. But I was also recognizing that the likelihood of finding that person was becoming more narrow. So there was, for a good number of years, from 40 to 43, I went through probably what felt like latent grief. I've come to realize in that that grief is actually called disenfranchised grief, which technically means that it's a type of grief that society doesn't actually recognize as being grief. That grief can look like a breakup, or a dissolution of a relationship. It can look like the loss of a job. or getting laid off. It's things that don't necessarily reflect the loss of a sentient being, if you will. You know, we all know what it feels like to feel grief if somebody in our important in our lives dies, or a pet even dies. But we don't, as a society, know how to grieve something we never had, or the dream, the loss of a dream.
I was just, you took the words out of my mouth. It's the loss of a dream. That's so interesting.
And
That's
so
so interesting.
I spent about 3 to 4 solid years, from 40 to easily to 43, 40, early 44, kind of walking around like just always feeling sad and not really knowing what to do with that. I didn't know where to go. All of my friends at that point were settled down and had families. I had a fair number of single girlfriends who hadn't yet crossed that path in their own lives. And so I didn't know how to talk about that experience with anybody personally.
Were they
The
younger or they just weren't thinking about it?
Some of them were younger. What I find is I've kind of historically, because I've kind of pursued this path, if you will, that looks different than I think a lot of people of our the same age as us. I've been single for longer. I've been career focused for longer. I feel a little bit of it like a societal anomaly in the life path I've either chosen or kind of consequentially have been living. And so some of my friends have been significantly younger than me and haven't had to cross that decision making part yet, or a lot of my friends are older and pursued the children they wanted. So I kind of have been walking around feeling really alone in that experience. And I suppose I attempted to try to share that experience with some people I trusted, some of my close inner circle, but it felt like they couldn't relate to my story. Talking about this experience to a mom who is so busy chasing their toddlers around or making play dates, like, it's something that, as much as I value my women friends, that's not their experience. And so oftentimes it's just hard to empathize with somebody who doesn't live your lived experience.
Yes.
And so I spent a long time like Googling what it was that I felt like I had. I didn't even know how to talk about it, but I knew I was alone, and I knew I couldn't relate to most of my contemporaries for various different reasons. And I stumbled on a community, fortunately, that has grown, I think, in population. And that community is called Childless Not by Choice. So there's actually language to talk about my experience. And I was so thrilled to have discovered that I wasn't alone in this. And B, it's actually called something, like this experience is being called childless not by choice.
I hear this so many times in Sage Real Stories interviews. This moment where women feel they found either it's someone by happenstance, like or a community, or they stumbled upon, a group or or a name for what they're experiencing. They suddenly feel like, oh, I'm not alone. Talk through that feeling that you felt a little bit more. Can you dive just a layer deeper into how that helped you emotionally?
Yeah, well, I think the first stage was in the realization that other women out there looked like me. So that was like, oh, I don't feel like this oddball anymore. Um, so that was the first step. And then actually connecting with those women in real life. I joined some platforms. I started talking to people on Zoom calls. I've met wonderful women in this community who, while their childlessness all comes from a different reason. We all have different stories. Some of us through infertility stories where they went through many years and many rounds of infertility of IVF treatments, and at the end of the day it wasn't successful, and they made the choice to stop trying. Yeah, and it's a hard choice. Or more circumstantially, like I am, who just didn't find the the person, or the person that they wanted to do life with. And regardless of our stories, the common denominator between us is that we are living this life of childless not by choice. So feeling like it was safe to share my story with other people who understood, and despite there being different circumstances that unites us, I finally emotionally felt like, oh my God, I feel like I found some of my people and I don't feel so alone in this experience. I think society still is really pro-natalist. And what I mean by that is there's this just expectation that women are, we're supposed to be following this path, right? We're supposed to be mothers. And I so wanted that for myself. It's taken me a really long time to shed the feeling of shame that I was doing something wrong, that it was my fault that I didn't meet my person. What I had realized was, though, is that I never foresaw. I think that we've come very far again in our society to enable and empower women to be able to make that choice on their own, to choose to have children on their own, regardless of whether there's a partner in the picture. But that was never a choice that I really wanted to pursue myself. I never foresaw myself being a mother on my own. I witnessed, my sister is a single mom. She's a divorced mom raising two boys. And I look at that lifestyle and how hard it is. I live on the opposite side of the coast from my family. And so I don't have a built-in support system like some people might who live near their family and they can provide support. So that was
Yeah.
never really an option for me.
Thank you for touching upon that. I have a personal friend who did make the choice to, turn 40, and she had children through IUI and a sperm donor, and just is a single mom of 3 kids doing it
Mhm,
on her own.
mhm.
I can imagine it's very hard. She does have lots of family around. So that was something in your mind that you just wasn't really a fit for you personally.
It wasn't something that I wanted to undertake on my own. And I will share with you something I don't make public a lot, but it seems appropriate to share this story because it is part of my story. But I was with a partner when I was 41, and it was not a relationship that was going to go the distance, but I did get pregnant, which I have a whole bag of different feelings and emotions around. Who would have thought that at that age you get pregnant unplanned? That's pretty unlikely. And he disappeared out of the picture. He didn't want to be a part of it. And I was confronted with that choice to, do this on my own? And the answer I kept coming back to was, I don't know that I can do this on my own. I have to say that I am grateful at the outcome of that, because I don't know that I could have made any other choice, because I knew I wanted a child so badly, and I wound up miscarrying. But I was so grateful that that was the ending, because I couldn't have foreseen any other options in that, in that experience. And that was a turning point for me, because I guess at that point in time I had a realization that maybe my life path was not being a mom, and that I had the opportunity to channel my own grief in the loss of that dream into helping other women who feel really alone in that experience. I am in the process now of building out a brand that is in service of women going through this experience, women who define themselves as childless not by choice, whether it be circumstantially similar to my story, or uh, through infertility and just the loss of that dream, who feel alone in that experience, because it can be devastating. And if we don't have the right support system in place to be able to talk about it, be able to share that with other women, and people that support us and help us feel seen, and don't reinforce that feeling of shame, because that feeling of shame is loud and it can eat you alive. What's interesting now is I think There's a lot of dialogue in the media now about being child free, and there is a a distinction between people who identify themselves as child free versus people who identify themselves as not having the family, the children that they wanted, childless, not by choice, if you will. Whether you have come to the realization that you relish your child free life, that can be a journey. But some people actually make the choice to not have children and are quite comfortable in that choice. Whether it's driven by just a desire to want to pursue your own purpose, your own fulfillment, there can be a whole host of different reasons to choose a child-free existence, and I support and encourage and celebrate all of them. But what is less talked about is not having the choice. When the choice is taken away from us, again through either circumstantially or infertility. It's a subsegment of the population of women who perhaps carry shame around more than the child-free woman, who need the support more because there's more kind of grief to process and to deal with. I have struggled in the past few years to redefine what my future looks like. I've gotten to a place of acceptance and peace in my own experience. I think I have summoned a sense of spirituality in and belief that my purpose in life is actually a higher calling to help other women through this, and accept that, you know, my life didn't deal me the deck of cards that I thought it would, but I want to make the best of this damn life. And I don't want to shortchange my life experience. So I'm not going to stop living my life and put my life on hold because I don't have the thing that I thought I was going to have. It's easy to get stuck in a sense of grief and victimhood where we feel stuck, where we can't re-envision what the next chapter of our lives look like. And I, having done a lot of work over many years, there's a lot of inner work to be done to kind of heal that part of ourselves and accept this, this life path. But there's also a lot of really exciting things that can be on the horizon in terms of redefining what our lives can look like.
Yeah.
And so I want to help women redefine the next chapter of their lives and get excited and find joy in the next chapter and really rediscover a sense of possibility and fulfillment. If it wasn't with children, that doesn't mean that your life has to stop.
This is so powerful. I just want to say, this is it right here. I mean, what you just said and what you're doing, because what it means is that we can let go of whether it's not having a child, whether that was the dream, or you have, and I'm drawing right now from different real stories that I've interviewed. Your your spouse dies at the age of 45, and you have two children to raise by yourself that you never dreamed of that life. Whether it's you have a child or two children and they are so severely disabled that you can't have a job, and you never planned on that. That wasn't motherhood in your dream. There are so many instances in our lives where things don't go as we planned or hoped. And if we can have that acceptance that you speak of, if we can come to that, and it's a journey, I know, as you said, it will always be a journey to get to that. But if you can get to that, then the rest of your life, the remaining chapters, as you say, are going to be so much more beautiful, and we'll be in a place in those chapters of our life where we're not stuck in this sadness, but we are thriving. That is so powerful, Jess.
Yeah, I think redefining what thriving looks like, I think, is really the essence of it.
Talk a little bit more. What are you going to be doing with women? How are you going to be able to, in your mind, potentially get them to that place?
Yeah, I am moving in the direction of building my own brand, a coaching and wellness brand. in which I hope to be able to launch in person retreats for women. We'll start on the West Coast in California, in which we're bringing together women who share this experience of being childless, not by choice, in community in a 3-day retreat to help women move through the emotions of being able to share their story. I think the most powerful thing is feeling comfortable in sharing one's story. That's half of what the healing process looks like, and I think that a lot of women are struggle to be able to share that story comfortably and move through the process of healing in community together, and seeing each other in community and being able to let go of some of that shame and really imagine what their life could look like. So I've drawn from a lot of my background in leading workshops, and I've created a wealth of different programming and workshop options. So that's the first step. And
Amazing.
what I also hope to be able to do is work with women one on one in reframing their story. What's so powerful is that healing exists in our ability to reflect on the stories we've told ourselves about our struggles. Just like you had me share my story, the details of my story, in reflecting on just how I got here in life, and all of the different milestones and moments in my life in which I faced adversity. And there's an opportunity to reframe the story we're telling ourselves about how we got here, so that we look at our past in a different way. So I'm drawing from my storytelling abilities to develop a storytelling and narrative one-on-one toolkit to help women identify first their story and then to reframe it. Things that we're able to let go of, the shame, uncomfortable emotions from our past, we can relinquish, and also to see where we have derived our own strength. I think every woman who has gotten to where we are today has faced adversity. And so that's something to actually celebrate in us. And so I want to be able to help women speak their story and to be able to reframe it and
Love that.
see their lives through a new lens.
Reframing your story, I really like that. It really resonates with me because I think we can get stuck in what, what we think our story is or should be as well. And moving past that, and it's, rewrite your story. There's a big thing on, you know, social media, rewrite your story. It's like, but it really is true that we can rewrite our story. Our story is not a closed book. And whether we're writing new chapters or we're reframing our story, we have that capability and it's really powerful. I think all of your skills and everything that has led you to this point, I love that you say this is your purpose. That is beautiful. And sometimes we don't imagine a certain path, but if you can have that place spiritually, whether you come to it a place of peace, this is where you're meant to be. And this is your story. This is your purpose is really powerful. And I will say you're going to be impacting so many people. I read some statistics that I would like to share, that the share of women approaching retirement without a nuclear family of their own is going to rise considerably in the next few decades. Almost a third of women have never been married by 35 right now. 15% will have never been married by the age of 50, and these numbers are likely to continue rising. Right now, 15% of women over 50 are child free. So, we may feel sometimes like it's such a small number of women that are faced with this situation, but it's not so small, and it's going to be continuing to rise as a society, according to the statistics. So I hope that stigma releases, and that shame goes away from this part of this situation, because that just adds so much more pain. But you're going to be helping so many women, Jess, in your work and your purpose. I'm so in awe of you.
Thank you. That means a lot. I think words of encouragement are helpful. Sometimes I feel like the weight of the world a bit is on my shoulders, and it's hard to talk about this narrative without it being my identity. And I think that there's a vulnerability in sharing a story that is being truthful about my own childlessness. I don't like to wear it as a badge. It feels uncomfortable. I don't want to be a crusader for that, or an advocate for that necessarily. But what I do want is to feel like other women don't have to go through this alone. I think if I can channel my own grief and my own feelings of being alone and isolated in this experience, and if I can help just one woman feel less alone, feel more seen, to be able to relinquish some of that, so she can, yeah, as you said, thrive in this experience, then it will have been worth it.
Absolutely amazing. This just speaks so much to the power of this concept of helping others through our own personal life experiences. For any of the listeners who want to follow along and check out what Jess is going to be doing through her program, she has a website. It'll be in the link in the episode bio. Any last, words of advice for our listeners?
Was somebody shared a quote with me, or I was struck by a quote that really resonated with me, which is, grief is the bridge between surviving and thriving. It's just such a powerful and evocative quote. That's kind of become my mantra. And thank you so much for having me. It's been a big relief to share this story, and it feels a little bit lighter. So thank you for giving me the platform to do that.
Hats off to you for doing everything that you're doing to support women and having the courage to share so openly and vulnerably today, to benefit other women listening. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Balance in life.